Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Radeon Navi video we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with Navi 10. Supposed pricing information, specifications and performance information has leaked for this new graphics card from AMD. And we're going to move over to the Radeon Pro V340, which is supposedly the first 7nm graphics card from AMD. Rather interesting, we also have some performance data regarding it as well. It's a very interesting GPU. It is designed specifically around the server market, but also can be virtualized. And then we're going to finish the video with Nvidia's infinite resolution, which is a rather interesting approach for dealing with higher resolution or lower resolution scaling in games, and also saving data as well. So we're going to start things out, as I just mentioned, with the RX 680 series, which is supposedly going to be powered by Navi 10. This information comes to us from tweaktown.com. So, you know, normal stuff, treat these rumors as rumors, and not confirmation, but still, it's an interesting discussion point nonetheless. So, just to get everyone up to speed, I'll remember to link a video in the description regarding this anyway, but the PlayStation 5 supposedly is going to be using Navi 10. In fact, Sony were giving AMD cash and actually asking them to develop Navi specifically for the PlayStation 5. But Navi, according to these rumors, is not going to be a high-performance card. But those earlier rumors were that the performance of this card was going to be around the same level as the Vega 64s. However, there has been an update according to Tweaktown. They allege that the performance of the Navi 10 GPUs instead is going to fall more in line with the GTX 1080 Ti rather than the Vega 64s. In fact, it actually might be a little faster than that thanks to GDDR6 memory. It will sport 8GB of GDDR6, and as for pricing, and this is to me the good news, it's going to operate between the $300 to $400 price point. This would be very compelling if you're considering an upgrade path in the mid-range. I mean, that really is more than enough performance for games nowadays anyway, to run at 1440p at very high frame rates, or even 4K, and around 60 FPS, maybe some concessions here or there for future games. So there are two options for memory configuration, assuming it does have 8GB of GDDR6. The first would be 8 modules, each module of course having 1GB of RAM. That would be a 256-bit memory bus, assuming we are operating at 18,000 Gbps. That means you're going to be operating a total memory bandwidth of 576GB per second memory bandwidth, or I could also have a 128-bit memory bus with 2 gigabyte modules, but the problem with that is that most likely you're just not going to have the memory bandwidth available. It would only be operating even at that clock speed at around 288GB per second, which just wouldn't be enough. So most likely we're going to be looking at a 256-bit memory interface with memory clocks at around the 16 to 18,000 Gbps mark. That's still pretty damn impressive. However, Tweaktown continued to go further, and according to their sources, where allegedly they were discussing things at Computex 2018, we're going to be seeing Navi at some point between now and 2019, but 7nm Navi is not going to be released until 2020 at the least. So in short, if you want a high-end SKU from AMD in the short term, then you're just out of luck. And obviously we've heard so many rumors concerning Nvidia and the Geforce 11 or 20 or whatever series. It's very hard to keep track, but I'll link a video in the description where you can check out more information on that if you want to be fully apprised of Nvidia. So what's my takeaway from all of this? Well, honestly, it's very difficult to know whether these rumors are accurate, but assuming they are, it's not necessarily a bad place for AMD to be, but of course it does depend on what Nvidia also release at the same price point. If Nvidia decide to release, let's say, a 2060 or a 2070 card at roughly the same price point, which is faster than AMD, then AMD are definitely going to be in a lot of trouble. But if Nvidia don't do that, and AMD manage to get like a decent portion of the mid-range card, but also do their obvious strategy of really pushing towards the data center, well, that could pay dividends for the company. Another video released today is that Intel are actually reportedly worried that AMD could be poised to take 20% of the CPU market, which is essentially $4 billion a year in just CPU sales for like the EPYC range of processors for the server. That's a lot of cash. So if AMD can do similar for HPC and deep learning and so on, it's a lot of cash to inject into the company. It's most likely why, according to reports anyway, Lisa Su was so ready to work with Sony on the PlayStation 5 because she knows it's consistent revenue. It's going to be an interesting 12 months, I feel, in the GPU space, particularly as we start to ramp towards the introduction of Intel and its discrete graphics cards, which, according to Intel themselves, this is not a rumor, they are looking to get into the GPU space by 2020. Of course, what the GPU space is for Intel is not known. Is it going to be more server focused? Is it going to be a lot of gaming GPUs? Well, supposedly, and this is slightly off topic, Intel will definitely be making gaming orientated cards, but what their performance level is going to be and how they're going to compare against the competition at the time, you and I, well, we can only wait and see. So let's move over to the other AMD piece of news for this video, the Radeon Pro V340 GPU. Now this GPU is rather interesting, and at the moment we're still waiting for all of the specifications of the card. I'm going to read out a few things we do know for certain. It is definitely a GPU which is designed for multi-user environments, specifically virtualization. From what the slide is, assuming this leak is accurate, and it does look to be genuine from what we can understand, I'll get more into that in just a second, but from what we can understand, it does support 32 users, 32 gigabytes of memory, and of course shared hardware encoding. And it's going to be used for media entertainment type of uses. What's rather interesting, and I'm going to read this out from notes here, the card is actually present in drivers, and they are known as the AMD 686C4 equals AMD Radeon Pro V340 MX GPU. Now the reason that's quite important is because it means a multi-GPU solution. Most likely, if it is a dual Vega card, it's most likely going to be dual Vega 10, which would be very impressive indeed in terms of level of performance. We also have benchmarks for this GPU, but of course how close it is to the final design and whether optimizations still need to be done in the drivers, and whether perhaps we're going to be seeing higher clock speeds on final production silicon and that type of thing, we just don't know. But still, AMD actually putting this out is going to be a fascinating GPU, because once again it is designed for virtualization, highly virtualized environments, which, if you think about it, putting this with something like an EPYC type of processor, or even possibly something like a Threadripper, like a Threadripper 2, it could be awesome for studios and production work. I'm going to be fascinated to see what type of market share AMD can get from this, particularly against what Nvidia cards it's going to be competing against. But overall, it's a good move for AMD, and I'm happy that they are releasing this type of card. It's going to be very lucrative for them, because we do know that they are certainly pushing towards virtualization. It's been one of the areas they have been pushing, certainly with EPYC. And what's rather cool about this as well is it does have as a built-in security processor, much like EPYC range of processors or the Ryzen Pros, although exactly how the secure processor works, whether it's going to be very similar to this or not, exactly how the secure processor works, though, is unknown right now. We can presume it's going to be very similar to, let's say, how EPYC functions or the Ryzen Pros, but that's just speculation on my part. However, it will be pretty awesome for virtualized environments. For example, if you are running on a shared host or that type of situation, it's probably going to be less awesome and less useful if you're doing something like a production environment locally. But still, it's nice that it's there, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how AMD are going to market the the GPU based on this alone. Modern day games have an inherent flaw, and that is that developers need to create textures for different resolutions and different levels of detail. Think of it this way: if you're running low resolution textures or medium resolution textures or high resolution textures, artists need to create different versions of those textures for the game and every single location that you're going to see textures within that game. In other words, it eats up a lot of space, particularly when you could have, let's say, a 1080p texture versus a 4K texture. So what are you going to do about it? Well, Nvidia have a patent which might answer that. It's called infinite resolution, and it makes use of vector-based graphics. In short, textures are, of course, pixel art, which essentially goes over geometry. I'm simplifying things, of course, for this video, but in essence, that's the idea here. When you have different objects, they are wrapped with 2D textures, and essentially that's how the world is drawn. But with infinite resolution, things would be very different. Instead, you would have a set of texture information which is encoded with the game scenes. The best way of describing it is that the GPU would actually be painting based upon this information rather than simply plastering over the texture, over the geometry. Now, this has a couple of benefits. One is it's scalable. So in other words, whether it's a lower resolution texture or a higher resolution texture, developers would simply be able to tell the GPU, of course, by programming it into the game engine and the game itself, what levels of detail you need in a certain scene. And this would be absolutely awesome for multiple reasons. One, it saves a lot of space, which is obviously a good thing. After all, I'm pretty sure that we've all seen games now balloon from 10 gigabytes to 20 gigabytes to 30 gigabytes to 50 to now it's 100 gigabytes in some games. Like Forza and Gears of War 4, they're like 100 gigabytes in some instances. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the visual difference and the quality of looking at 4K textures, but even so, it absolutely eats through hard drive space, even on larger hard drives. And of course, the other issue is that it takes a bloody age to download the darn things. Now, this is not done through some mythological new technology. Instead, it's going to be utilizing vector graphics. And how this is going to exactly be implemented is still unknown yet. I suspect that Nvidia are most likely discussing this with game developers and as well, of course, developers of game engines. But think of it this way. If you come from a 720p screen all the way to an 8K screen, the game is going to look just as good. So imagine games like Quake 2, if it was made with infinite resolution and vector graphics, you could in theory at least play the game at like 800 by 600 and then scale that up to an 8K display and it would still look just as awesome. It's a fascinating insight into what we're going to be seeing from games of the future. Whether, of course, this gets fully implemented or not, I'm not certain, but I would not be surprised if developers do want to incorporate this into their games. Nvidia recently have put out a lot of interesting technology, including, of course, the idea of really pushing towards ray tracing, which AMD have been embracing. So I would not be surprised if the industry does take some of this on board, and it could also be really awesome for consoles as well. I'm going to be fascinated for the next couple of years of game graphics, and yeah, this plus ray tracing, virtual reality as well. The future is very bright for gaming, and I look forward to seeing what studios might do with this technology. With all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.